Moira had been irritated for so long it started to feel like a climate. Something in the air, a constant pressure against her skin. It began small, the way these things often do. A headline that seemed engineered to raise her blood pressure. A video that was not funny but had 3 million likes. A friend posting a photograph of bare feet beside an infinity pool. Captioned, "Grateful," as though gratitude were proof that life had gone according to plan. Another friend, the same age as Moira, posted a hospital bracelet and a fundraising link while smiling bravely for the camera. One person appeared to be living beautifully, another just struggling to survive. She felt irritated by both. She resented people for succeeding too easily and became frustrated with those who seemed unable to improve their lives. She criticized strangers for complaining, then complained about how much everyone seemed to be complaining. She wanted people to be honest, but when they shared their pain, she found it exhausting. She wanted people to be hopeful, but when they celebrated, she wondered, were they pretending? The news offered no relief. A man shouted about the end of the world. A panel of experts, interrupted one another while debating who was responsible. Tragedies arrived beside advertisements, war, scandal, celebrity gossip, financial fear, influencer scandal, and inspirational slogans, all competing for the same few seconds of her attention. Moira scrolled until her thumb ached, and still she continued, as though the next post might finally explain why everything felt so loud. She compared herself without wanting to. She judged without meaning to. She envied people she didn't even think she liked, and worried about people she could not help. The world appeared to be succeeding and collapsing in the same breath. Somehow, Moira felt expected to respond to all of it. At night, she would close her phone, but the room continued to buzz. The buzzing had moved inside her. It spoke in familiar accusations. You should have done more. You should have chosen better. You should be happier by now. Look at them. Now, look at you. Even silence felt no longer silent. It felt like the moment before another demand. Then, because life has a sense of timing that borders on rude, Moira lost her job. There was no dramatic confrontation, no final speech, nor satisfying opportunity to say what she had always wanted to say. There was only an email that began with, "Unfortunately," and ended with, "We wish you the best," as though the best were a place and they had kindly included directions. She filled out applications until her fingers cramped. She rewrote her resume, rearranged her strengths, and polished her history as though the past could be edited into something more employable. She sat through interviews in which people smiled too widely and asked, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" She wanted to answer, somewhere quieter. Instead, she offered a carefully prepared response that began to taste like cardboard. When the call finally came, it was not for a quiet office or a coveted remote position. It was for a waitressing job at an exclusive restaurant called the Bellevue. Moira had heard of it. Celebrities dined there. Photographers gathered near its entrance. Business executives conducted meetings over meals that cost more than some people earned in a day. It was elegant, exclusive, and constantly busy. A job dealing with people. Moira stared at the phone after accepting the position and released a short, humorless laugh. Ha. Of all the places she could have ended up, life had placed her directly inside more noise. On her first evening, the Bellevue looked like a dream someone had paid too much to create. Golden lights spilled from chandeliers. Every table appeared deliberately arranged. Candles flickered against polished glass. Silverware resting in perfect alignment near perfectly folded napkins. The air smelled of citrus, perfume, roasted herbs, and money. But behind the swinging kitchen doors, the dream cracked open. Chaos lived there. Waitresses moved like a fast river, arms full and bodies turning sharply through narrow spaces. "Corner! Behind you! Table 12 is waiting! Where's the salmon? Move!" Plates clattered, drawers slammed, A cook shouted across the kitchen. Someone dropped the glass, and its breaking became only one more sound among many. The dining room produced a different kind of noise. Laughter rose from crowded tables, soft music in the background. Cameras flashed near a private booth, a bartender shaking ice violently inside a metal container, a couple arguing quietly enough to protect their dignity, but loudly enough to injure one another. Near the bar, a sporting event played across a massive screen. Every few minutes, the crowd shouted as though their voices could influence the outcome. Moira carried plates through it all. She heard requests, complaints, jokes, cheers, greetings, orders, and corrections. Other servers brushed against her as they hurried past. Guests lifted fingers to summon her. Some called her miss, others called her sweetheart. One man snapped his fingers without looking in her direction. Everything wanted something, and Moira had already spent years giving away pieces of herself. She had given attention to strangers online. She had given emotional energy to headlines she could not change. She had given comparison to people who did not even know she existed. She had given worry to possibilities that had never happened. Now strangers in suits and diamonds wanted her to refill their glasses with a smile. By the middle of the night, the pressure inside her had almost become physical. A server bumped her shoulder and hissed, "Watch it," even though Moira had nowhere else to move. The game on the screen reached another exciting moment and the bar erupted. A celebrity laughed loudly at a private joke while photographers gathered again near the entrance. Someone in the kitchen shouted her name. A customer complained that his food was taking too long. Another table wanted separate checks. A child began crying. Who brings children to this kind of place? A glass broke, then another server collided with a busboy. A tray tilted. Porcelain crashed against the floor. Several guests gasped, then laughed as though the accident had been arranged for their entertainment. Moira flinched so sharply that the plates on her own tray rattled. She looked down at the carefully arranged food and thought wildly and irrationally. All this effort for this. In that moment, every sound gathered together. The news, the scrolling, the opinions, the success of others, the suffering of others, the expectations, the disappointment, the conversations she could not escape, and the thoughts she could not silence. The entire world seemed to have entered the Bellevue and crowded around her. Her heart struck once against her chest. Then her body chose before her mind could object. Moira turned toward the dining room and shouted with a voice she barely recognized.
Would everyone just be quiet?
The restaurant stopped. Mouths remained open in the middle of words. Forks hovered between plates and lips. The bartender froze with the metal shaker in his hands. Heads turned toward Moira. For one breath, the entire room stared at her. Then the restaurant resumed. Guests murmured. Someone laughed uncertainly. A waitress whispered to another. The manager began walking toward her with a look of disbelief. The kitchen door swung open. The sports crowd reacted to the screen once again. The chaos continued exactly as before. But Moira, she could no longer hear it. She stood perfectly still, waiting for the sound to return. It did not. The room moved around her like a television with the volume turned off. Mouths opened and closed. Hands gestured. People leaned toward one another, speaking directly into each other's faces. A woman laughed so hard that her shoulders trembled, but no laughter reached her. Moira watched as a fork slipped from someone's hands. She watched it fall. The metal struck the polished floor. She expected a sharp ring. Nothing came. She touched one ear, then the other. At first, fear tightened around her chest. Have I gone deaf? The manager stood in front of her, speaking rapidly. His expression moved between anger and concern. His mouth formed words she could not understand. He pointed to the rear of the restaurant. She watched him as though he stood behind glass. Then she heard the only sound that remained. Her heart beating, slow, heavy, present. This silence did not feel empty. It felt clean. For the first time in months, no headline entered her. No opinion demanded a response. No stranger's success became evidence of her failure. No tragedy required her immediate grief. No voice told her what she should have accomplished by now. There was only Moira, her breath, her body, her existence. This silence surrounded her like a soft coat. The manager continued speaking, but his frustration could no longer enter. Another server brushed past and appeared to mutter something that rhymed with itch, but the words never reached her. In the kitchen, another dish shattered in complete silence. Moira set down her tray, then walked. She did not run, nor apologize, nor offer any explanation. She moved slowly through the dining room while the restaurant continued its elaborate performance around her. Servers crossed paths. Guests spoke with animated faces and hands. The television crowd celebrated. Cameras flashed. None of it touched her. She passed through the rear hallway, pushed open the exterior door, and stepped into the night. Rain had left the pavement shining beneath streetlights. Cars moved along the road. People hurried beneath umbrellas. A distant siren flashed red against the buildings, but no sound accompanied it. Moira stood beneath the Bellevue sign and breathed. She might have been crying. She might have been smiling. Her face seemed unfamiliar, as though it were learning an expression it knew but had forgotten. She reached into her pocket and removed her phone. The screen lit immediately. Notifications stood one upon another like bricks. Breaking news, a friend's engagement, a stranger's outrage, a financial warning, a celebrity scandal, a motivational quotation, someone's vacation, someone's funeral. The world waited inside the small glowing rectangle, ready to enter her again. Moira's thumb hovered over the screen. Then she understood that the noise was not only outside her. It had become a habit, a reflex, a hunger she had mistaken for awareness. She had believed that staying informed required carrying everything. She had believed that caring required constant access. She had believed that comparison might eventually show her how to become enough. But the phone had never told her when enough was enough. Moira pressed the power button and held it. The screen went dark. In the deep, steady silence that followed, she finally heard something she had not heard in months. Nothing. And nothing, she realized, at this moment was exactly what she needed. She stood there for several minutes, allowing the quiet to do what quiet does, untangling her, slowing her, making room. Behind the glass, the Bellevue remained full. People continued laughing, arguing, eating, serving, demanding, celebrating, and performing their luxurious dance. The world had not changed simply because Moira could no longer hear it. At first, she believed that might be enough. She could remain outside. She could protect this silence by refusing to return. She could walk away from the restaurant, the job, the phone, and every place that had become too loud. But as she watched the room moving behind the glass, another understanding slowly emerged. Silence could become a hiding place just as easily as noise could become a prison. The quiet had rescued her from the pressure, but perhaps it had not come to remove her from life forever. Perhaps it had come to show her how to return. Moira opened her eyes fully and studied the restaurant. Waiters moved between tables. Diners leaned toward one another, laughing and speaking. Hands rose to request service. Glasses met in celebration. Somewhere inside, another dish appeared to break. For once, Moira did not judge any of it. She did not resent the people who were enjoying themselves. She did not condemn those who were impatient. She did not assume that every expression revealed the whole truth of a person's life. She simply watched. She had once believed peace required the world to stop. She thought quiet could only exist when demands ended and everyone finally lowered their voices. But the world had not stopped. It continued without asking her permission. Perhaps peace was not the absence of movement. Perhaps it was the ability to remain present without allowing every movement to enter her. Peace, she started to understand, did not require pretending nothing mattered. It required understanding that everything did not have to matter at once. Moira stepped back out of the quiet, but this time, she did so slowly and with thoughtful intention. She approached the restaurant door and placed one hand against the glass. It felt cool beneath her palm. On the other side, her manager stood near the host station, speaking sharply to another server. A busboy hurried past carrying empty glasses. A guest at the bar waved impatiently for his attention. Nothing inside had changed, but Moira had. She opened the door. The noise returned in pieces. First came the low murmur of conversation, then the clinking of silverware and glasses, the commentary from the sports broadcast, a burst of laughter near the bar, the call of a cook beyond the kitchen doors. Each sound approached her like someone knocking. Before, Moira had opened the door to everything. Now, she understood that she did not have to. She stepped inside and allowed the door to close behind her. A waitress hurried past and called, "Behind you." Moira moved aside. A customer raised his empty glass. She noticed him, but did not rush toward him. The manager saw her and approached quickly.
"Moira, what happened out there?"
he demanded.
"You can't shout at an entire dining room and walk away."
Moira listened, not only to his words, but to what had happened inside her as he spoke. She felt the familiar irritation rising, the pressure to defend herself, the instinct to absorb his frustration and carry it as though it belonged to her. For once, she did none of those things. Calmly, she stated, "I became overwhelmed. I should not have shouted. I'd like a moment before I continue." The manager stared at her. Perhaps he expected an argument or tears. Perhaps he expected the exhausted woman who had entered the restaurant earlier, apologizing even when she had done nothing wrong. Instead, Moira stood quietly before him, not empty, not numb, present. He looked toward the crowded dining room and then back at her.
"I'll give you 5 minutes,"
he said.
"Then we'll talk."
Moira nodded. She walked to the service station but did not immediately return to work. Beside a shelf of folded napkins, she closed her eyes and took one slow breath, then another. The sounds remained, but they no longer formed one enormous wall pressing against her. She could distinguish them now: a glass resting on a table, a chair sliding across the floor, a woman laughing, a man complaining, the kitchen bell ringing. They were individual sounds, not commands, not judgments, not proof she was failing, just sounds. Moira picked up a clean tray. She did not know whether she would finish the shift. She did not know whether the manager would fire her after their conversation. She did not know whether the Bellevue, or waitressing itself, belonged in the life she wanted to build. But she knew she would no longer make decisions from the frantic place that had brought her there. She would not run simply because life became loud. She would not remain simply because leaving felt like failure. She would listen carefully to herself, to the room, to those in the room. When Moira stepped back onto the dining floor, the restaurant continued its luxurious dance. People laughed, glasses clinked, servers crossed paths. The crowd near the television celebrated another victory. The world had found its voice again in her ears, but it no longer possessed hers. Moira moved through the room at a measured pace, carrying the tray steadily before her. The quiet had not followed her as a wall meant to keep life away. It had settled somewhere deeper. It had become a small, protected space within her, a place she could return to without disappearing, a place where she could pause before reacting, a place where the world could speak without deciding who she was for her. Her wish had not freed her from noise forever. It had shown her that silence was not meant to become another hiding place. It was meant to show her, to teach her how to return.